are extremely excited and honored to present the Technovation World Summit keynote, NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli. And just a heads up, after Jasmin speaks today, she'll be answering 3 questions that our community members sent in ahead of time, so definitely stick around for those questions. And now I have the honor of telling you a bit more about Jasmin. So Jasmin grew up in New York, earning a bachelor's in aerospace engineering with information technology at MIT and a master's in engineering science in aerospace engineering from the Naval Postgraduate School. She's an AH-1W Super Cobra pilot and Marine Corps test pilot, has over 150 combat missions and 2,000 hours of flight time in over 25 different aircrafts. So to say Jasmin is brave is an understatement. NASA noticed this bravery and selected Jasmin to join the 2017 NASA astronaut candidate class. After completing 2 years of intensive training, Jasmin is now eligible for missing assignment people. Perhaps some of you were like me and in January joined the world in watching the graduation ceremony online for Jasmin's NASA class, who are affectionately called the Turtles. What was so powerful about this ceremony was that when each astronaut candidate was to be called up and recognized as NASA's newest astronaut, it was one of their fellow classmates, a teammate of theirs, who introduced them. As Jasmin was called up, it was her fellow Turtles astronaut and friend, Johnny Kim, who noted the qualities about Jasmin that he had learned about her through her rigorous teamwork and that didn't put a doubt in his mind about going to space with her. That Jasmin is dependable, compassionate, intelligent, fierce, resilient, and loyal. Jasmin, your dedication to your country, to the furthering of science and engineering for our planet, and to your Artemis team, who instill their trust in you daily, is why you are an incredible role model for our students who accomplish tremendous things when they work together and are brave. We are honored to have you as our keynote speaker. Without further ado.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for the kind introduction. You know, there are so many aspects of my job, if you can even call being an astronaut a job, that I love. But I have to say, one of my favorite parts is being introduced to various organizations and nonprofits such as this one and seeing firsthand how bright our future is. And I'm continuously impressed with you all, and I'm talking to the young women and men out there, you know, our next generation of leaders, innovators, scientists, engineers, philanthropists. For you to have learned at such a young age the importance of applying your knowledge and abilities, your time, and your resources towards lifting those around you up and making the world and community you live in a better place is really remarkable. And I'm so honored to be speaking to you all today. And to the adults out there who have taken the time to mentor these children and help bring their ideas to life, a huge thank you as well. You know, I was looking at some of the technologies you all have produced, and I was telling Katie I could spend the rest of my time talking about how cool they are, but I've been instructed not to do that. So instead, I'd like to talk a bit about my personal journey. And it's a bit of a weird thing to be in a place now where I sometimes get to hear or read my own life and accomplishments summarized. And generally, a lot of the same key points are highlighted. You know, graduated from MIT with an undergrad in aerospace engineering, served in the Marine Corps as a Cobra pilot, did 3 deployments to include combat, was a test pilot, and now, of course, achieved lifelong dream of becoming an astronaut. But of course, when you just point out those highlights, you miss all the nuanced details, all the internal doubts, all the challenges, all the contributing people, the long nights studying or working, and even all the strokes of luck that were a part of that journey. And it's really those little things along the way that I've learned the most from myself and I think are worth sharing. So let's just focus on that very first highlight. Graduated from MIT with an undergrad in aerospace engineering. And to be fair, if that were all I'd done, I probably wouldn't even have been asked to speak to you all today. But, that one single notable point in my journey, that was 4 of the most challenging, humbling, doubt-filled years of my life. When I entered MIT as a freshman, I would say I was fairly confident. I was a very good student all the way through high school. I genuinely enjoyed learning. And I was lucky to have gone to a public school with teachers who I felt really cared about their students. And when people asked me during freshman orientation what I planned to study at MIT, I would tell them I wanted to double major in aerospace engineering and architecture. And most people looked at me like I was a bit crazy, and some even laughed at me. And as I looked through the course catalog to select classes for my first semester, I saw there was the basic differential equations class to fulfill the core requirement. And then there was this more conceptual, kind of more advanced differential equations class. And to be fair, they both fulfilled the same requirement. But as I said, I loved learning, and this other class sounded really interesting. So despite several people warning me to just take the basic class, I signed up for what I thought would be the more interesting class. After all, to that point, I'd always done very well in math. I enjoyed it, and I thought it came to me fairly easily. Well, you might be able to guess it didn't actually go that well. So the exam for that class was actually my first test ever at MIT, and I had studied very hard for it. But when that test was handed back to me, there was a 24 written at the top. And this was not a 24 out of 25. I had just gotten a 24 out of 100 on my very first exam at MIT. And, misery loves company, so I kind of peeked around to see if perhaps my classmates had at least also bombed it. And I saw grades mostly in the 80s and 90s. Now, if you don't think I wasn't terrified in that moment, if you don't think I didn't doubt whether or not I was even going to graduate college, let alone get decent enough marks to ever fulfill any of my dreams, you'd be very wrong. And while it's somewhat easy to look back now that I know what happens after that, but at that time, I couldn't just fast forward to see where I'd be in 5, 10, 15 years. All I knew was I had studied really hard, I had tried, and I had failed miserably. Worse than I ever had before, and others around me had done quite well. And maybe MIT isn't that hard for some people, but for me, the remaining 7 semesters after that one were not much easier. I was humbled. I learned that sometimes you need to ask for help. And I learned that if you challenge yourself and if you want to achieve something great, you will fail along the way. Now, I'm not going to go through all the times I failed in the 15 to 20 years since then, but I promise you that was not the last time. But I never once considered giving up. If I had tried and continued to fail and eventually even got kicked out, well, I couldn't control that. But I knew that I was not going to give up because this was something that was really important to me and was a really important step in my journey. And for the young women and men out there, if you've never experienced failure yet, if you've been lucky enough to never have really doubted yourself to this point in your lives, I want you to remember that when you challenge yourself and when you push yourself to achieve your full potential and you aim for greatness, you will fail at some point and more likely at many points. But if you know what you're doing is worth it to you, don't ever give up, and don't decide something's not worth it just because it's hard. being passionate about and loving what you're doing are not the same as it being easy. You know, there have been days where I've questioned, why am I doing what I'm doing? It's just so hard. But I've always known that it's been worth it. And that's what's given me the like real feeling of satisfaction when I achieve something. And ultimately, you are the primary author of your own futures. Thank you.
Jasmin, thank you so much. Wow. I think I can speak for everyone in saying that I think we all need to hear this in many ways, right? Especially with the pandemic, I'm just thinking how you hear stories from our participants and teams where failures are more common, and especially with school. I mean, you just spoke to all our students out there who you know, want to accomplish such great feats as you. And I just really appreciate you speaking to that point. And something else I thought was interesting was how you said to not be so scared of your failures, because we end up being most scared of the things we fail because we want to do them so much. It's our goal, you know? So just remembering that it's because we want it that bad.
Yeah, and you know, we do, like, from a young age, we try and fail at things, but you know, for things that are just not a big deal, it doesn't matter, it doesn't scare us. But when it's something that you really care about and you feel is really important, it's terrifying, because you don't know what the future holds. You have to trust that if you believe and if you try and if you push yourself and try different things, you will be able to achieve that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that actually is a good segue to one of the questions that our community has provided. And you already spoke to this, so no need to, you know, if you don't have another full story. But Alma from Minnesota in the United States had asked, you know, did you ever feel like you weren't good enough to do something, and how you overcame that? So do you have any other examples?
Yeah, and I think the obvious answer from what I just said is yes, absolutely. But I will say that I think it's changed a bit over the course of my life. You know, when I was younger, I generally did pretty well at things, and you know, you fail at little things here and there, but you know, that time when I took that first exam at MIT, that was the first time I really failed something that I had put my full effort towards and I felt really mattered. So up until that point, I didn't really question myself that much because I generally didn't fail at things that I'd really worked hard on. Now, that 4 years at MIT and subsequent years after, I feel like my confidence kind of did low a bit because I failed and I failed and I failed, you know, over and over again. But it's kind of been a curve, and now that I've had that experience of failing, pushing through it, and seeing that I can achieve success in the end. Yes, in moments I still question myself and whether I can do something, but I can look back and say, remember when the last time was when you failed something and you felt like, oh no, am I ever going to make it through this? And so now I kind of have that experience to look back on. And so it's kind of come back up where I would say overall, I have this confidence where in moments, maybe I feel like I'm not good enough or question that, but I can go back to that repository and, you know, that helps.
Exactly. That's awesome. And just as you said, you know, for all the really young viewers out there who may not have faced these kinds of failures yet, they'll get to that at some point and they'll be able to build that repository. That's a wonderful answer. Awesome. So how about our next question is from Ali, who's also from Minnesota. And they ask, wow. Yeah, I know, got great questions from there. What are you most scared about going into space?
Yeah, you know, I I thought about this one a little bit because I think the kind of first things that come to mind are the, launching on a rocket, this, being away from home for this long. But when I really thought about it, I realized the thing that I fear most is making a mistake that negatively impacts my fellow crew, or the mission or the spacecraft. Because at the end of the day, by the time I'm sitting on top of a rocket and launching to space, I can't do anything about that rocket below me. But it's the things that I do control, and those are the things I'm nervous about. And that kind of is what pushes me to constantly study and train in these various things. So I'm not that failing point in a mission, because to me, that's the thing that really kind of keeps me up and worrying at night, is making sure I'm not the one to mess something up. And not that it's not okay to, you're not perfect. It's okay to mess up sometimes, but to make sure I'm doing everything I can so that that's limited.
Totally. And I will say, just in watching your graduation, which I assume others out there watching now saw, you online in that as well. Your team members do really trust you, and you're going to be so awesome. And we're all rooting for you. So
thank you. Yeah, we've got a great group. I love my classmates. So
yeah, it's a really great class. Yeah. Cool. So I'll go to the final question from our audience. And this is from Adana from Almaty, Kazakhstan. And they ask, what advice would you give someone who, dreams of being where you are now, but perhaps they can't really believe in that happening?
Yeah, first off, Kazakhstan, that's a bit farther than Minnesota. So I'm in Houston, so hello from Houston. I think, the short answer, the first thing I would say is believe, right? Now, believing without action isn't going to get you anywhere, right? There needs to be more than just believing, but if you don't believe you can do something, you're probably going to be right. And I am a really, really big believer in the power of the mind. And actually, if you don't mind, I'll tell a little story about this, that this was actually very recently. So in the Marine Corps, we have to do a physical fitness test every year. And there are different standards for women and men, but it includes, or for women, it used to be a 3-mile run, crunches, and this flexed arm hang where you're holding yourself up on a bar. Now the men, instead, they did a 3-mile run in the crunches, but they did pull-ups. And a couple of years ago, the Marine Corps changed that standard for females, and now females also have to do pull-ups. And over the last couple of years, they've actually increased the number that you need to do to get the maximum score. And for me, I had to do 12 pull-ups to get the maximum score. I've never in my life been able to do 12 pull-ups. At my peak, I was able to do 8, right? And I've never even really considered doing 12 pull-ups. Not that I would say I thought it was impossible, but I would think, oh, I'd have to put so much effort into this, and why is that going to be the one thing I focus on? I'll tell you, when the Marine Corps changed that standard for females, and I saw that 12 was the number I needed to get the maximum score, I was like, well, if other females can do that, I can do it too. And I got 12, and now I can do 12 pull-ups, and I'm continuing to increase. But it was just that change in my mindset of believing, oh, okay, well, I guess it's not that big a deal for a woman to be able to do 12 pull-ups. So if they think I can do 12 pull-ups, I can do 12 pull-ups. And that was from someone who I feel like I've tried to be very good throughout my life, of not questioning my abilities just because I'm a woman and things like that. And so it really struck home with me that, wow, the power of the mind is so important. And so So like I said, I think the most important thing is for you to believe you can do something. And one other thing I'd say is, don't get so caught up in the destination that you don't enjoy the journey, because I think sometimes people get so focused on their end state that they forget everything I've done along the way to get here. If I didn't become an astronaut, I would have been still very happy and very satisfied with the things I'd done in my life, because I truly was passionate about them and truly enjoyed them. So I think that's one important thing as you decide your path to getting to where you want to be. Make sure you're doing things that you really love.
That's a great, thank you for sharing that story and opening up about that. Yeah, getting over the physical, what we think of as physical possibilities. I mean, honestly, it just made me think of how, we put people in space, we put people on the moon, and we're looking at Mars. For lack of a better noun, that's like, we are doing it. So why can't I do 12 pull-ups?
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And I think people in the chat in the last minute or two, just to end on a fun note, I think people have observed your instruments, Jasmin, and I have to ask, just to round this out, do you plan on bringing anything to space, any of those instruments? I know you were talking about getting into your bass, so.
Yeah, earlier we were talking about my new coronavirus hobby has been playing the bass guitar. I don't know. It depends what they'll let me take, but sure, maybe I'll bring a guitar up there if they let me, if there's room for it. I think that would certainly be fun and a good way to, pass some free time with the rest of the crew.
Yes, you definitely should. And maybe that astronaut band will get together and play from space at that point.
Yeah, I have to say, every time I do a appearance from in here, I get asked questions about the instruments.
It's just such an impressive assortment, Well, gosh, Jasmin, just thank you so much again. Thank you, everybody, to tuning into this. We want to give people enough time to, go to a bathroom break, get some water before our next workshop, which is a nuance workshop and Q&A. And Jasmin, this has been absolutely, the pleasure is all mine. And, we can't wait for our students to accomplish incredible feats just as you have.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure, and good luck to everyone during the summit.